biophysical researchers think of SWAMP, where there are certain ways and protocols that we use in our work when it is research work, so we're all kind of on the same page. So this is a test of whether we can look at some of the ideas about research questions and qualitative research and see if that fits with what it means to be CTP and how we do our work. Anything else I need to add about the packet from your perspective, Verna?
If you want to talk a little bit about the portfolio option.
Yes, and the portfolio is the way that this online training is going to be linked to your work, where through participation in the training and webinar, you'll pick something that you're working on. It could even be that proposal that just got submitted to the Science Collaborative, even though you've probably fleshed your ideas out for that. But through the learning portfolio activities each session, that's where you'll bring in real things from your work and work on those real things in a way that we give each other feedback and also have the advantage of hearing from Verna in ways that help you do your work for the course.
Great. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to move on then.
Okay.
So first, I'd like to give just a little bit more of a background on qualitative research. And in the video, I gave a definition of qualitative research. Here's another one. Qualitative research seeks to understand a given research problem or topic from the perspectives of the local population it involves. So what I've used it for, and I think qualitative research is really good for capturing values, opinions, behaviors, emotions, relationships between and among different people, such as stakeholders. And in the video, I brought up a hypothetical case study and that I wanted to explore staff meeting dynamics. And so as an example, in this case, I'm interested in understanding the culture created by this group of individuals within that context. My data will ultimately provide complex, rich descriptions of how people experience these meetings and interactions. And these types of descriptions can result from different types of data. So oral history, interviews, photos, actual texts like meeting minutes, for instance, focus groups. And when I say descriptions and say rich descriptions, I mean rich rather than anecdotal. While data might be considered anecdotal, and qualitative research is usually referred to as anecdotal, the analysis is rich and rigorous. Here are some of the attributes of qualitative methods, and I'll go over these a little bit more. So as mentioned in the video, you are choosing a phenomenon to explore. There is an iterative style of collecting data, analyzing data, that I'll talk about in a minute. In order to get those rich descriptions, there's a deep attentiveness to the meanings that people bring to their experiences. And the methods are more flexible than quantitative research. And I'll talk about that as well. So let's just review my hypothetical case study, because I'm going to be using it a little bit throughout this training. I would like to better understand the interpersonal dynamics within our staff meetings. This meets the characteristics of qualitative research because I am a participant and can explore the case study in its natural form. There is interaction among participants which allows me to capture dialogue. I believe that a better understanding of the phenomenon of staff meetings will enable me to become a better facilitator of ideas toward more productive conversation. So this is my case. And here I'm seeking to explore the phenomenon of staff meetings in this particular context. So I'd like to introduce some points that will actually go over more in the next two trainings, and I will be referring back to that case study occasionally, just as an example. So I mentioned that qualitative research is flexible. There's flexibility in the design of your study in that the design takes shape gradually as you listen to the meaning of the data. So it might be that something that concerns you at the beginning of research may seem less vital later on, and vice versa. So you adapt your data collection to what you're learning. And this means, in part, suspending your assumptions to actively solicit ideas and themes from those you are studying. Data collection analysis is iterative. So you gather information, analyze, winnow it down, and test. And this process may lead you to refine or change your questions, or even change the people that you have decided to study. So it's very adaptive. And your goal through these multiple iterations of gathering data, analyzing, and testing is to build a theory that's grounded in the data that you heard, the experiences and understanding of your study group. And again, we'll talk more about this in the next two trainings. Now, if you were going to do a full-blown empirical study, you might be interested in validity and generalizability of data. So I want to just touch upon this. In terms of validity, qualitative data has something called triangulation, and that means that you use 3 or more data collection methods, such as like interviews, text analysis, and focus groups, and data would only be considered significant if it resulted from all data collection methods. Now, in your case, you know, if you want to study something that is happening in your daily job, it may be that you don't need to collect data from 3 different sources. In terms of generalizability, and I think as mentioned in the video, in qualitative research, we're more interested in gaining a rich and complex understanding of a specific social context and phenomenon than we are in eliciting data that could be generalized to other populations or geographic areas. So we're interested in creating a theory about a particular phenomenon. And in my case, my theory of staff meeting dynamics is X, Y, and Z. And a last consideration is this idea of positioning or positionality. And this is, in qualitative research, there's a lot of reflecting upon yourself as a researcher, the subjectivity, and also your position in relation to those you are studying. So when you are conducting an interview or you are an observer, there are certain things that go along with that, like power dynamics, and acknowledging this and exploring this is important. Okay, before we move on to the next slide, this is one of those times where we're going to ask you to speak. Let me move on to another worksheet. Okay, so what I'd like to get a sense of, and we did a little bit this in our last call, is if any of you have experience using qualitative methods, if you could just, like in a nutshell, summarize what that is, what those are. And I will open up my control panel to see who's raising their hand. And Dolores, you can unmute people as they raise their hand.
I absolutely can. I can even offer
to
pick them if no one does.
Oh no, okay. It might be that no one, well, what about, interviews? Has anyone conducted an interview? Okay.
Oh, here we go. We have Heidi NERRS from San Francisco.
Okay.
Go ahead, Heidi.
Hello. Well, for my master's thesis, I interviewed commercial fishermen in Massachusetts and Rhode Island about their perceptions of state policy on ocean management.
Okay. Okay. Did you use a particular interview style?
Interview style.
Like in terms of open-ended questions?
Oh yes, yeah. I guess it was like semi-structured interviews, and the sampling piece was hard. Trying to find a rigorous method for sampling people, but I ended up using kind of like a networked approach to finding the right people to talk to as well.
Okay. Great. And we'll actually be talking about sampling, so it's great to get your feedback on that. Anyone else?
Okay. Yeah, we also have, thank you, Heidi, and we also have Tona Marie. Tona, I'm going to unmute you. Go for it.
Hi, I've used the interview method as well, focus groups, and survey design.
Okay. Great. Are there particular, well, I guess we're going to ask this question later, but are there particular data collection methods that you would like to learn more about that you know of? Or learn more about the three that you named?
I think the when we started the reading that you had before for this class was good about crafting good research questions and thinking about that, because it also gets to the type of questions you ask on for any of these methods. You know, how you think about the questions that you want to pose in each of these, and the actual how that is received by people that you might be posing them to. So, and then the other thing is Chris already had given me a little teaser about coding when you collect all this qualitative data, so I want to get into that a little deeper.
Great. Okay, yes, we'll talk a little bit about crafting data collection questions today and coding during the next training. Also, if as I'm capturing your thoughts throughout the 2 hours, if I don't capture them correctly as I'm writing them, please let me know.
Okay. Thank you, Tona. I don't think I mentioned, Verna, that Tona Marie Surgeon Rogers is from Wacoit Bay in Massachusetts. So she's just down the road. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, Tona, I'm going to mute you again. And if you've already raised your hand and spoken, if you could unraise your hand, that would be great. That'll help me keep track. And the next person we have is Matt Chassie from Silver Spring. Go ahead, Matt.
Hi, so you can hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay,
Great.
so I'd say I've used mostly a lot of informal interviews through some ethnographic studies that I've participated in, looking at foreign cultures, specifically around issues of poaching and agroforestry, as well as I've used standardized, the open-ended questions through interviews and actually formalized surveys, written surveys to folks looking at ecotourism as a business model.
Okay. Great. And so when you say ethnographic studies, so were you sort of living within a certain population?
Yes,
And
yes. These harken back to my old Peace Corps days in Africa.
Oh, okay. Great. Thank you.
Sure.
Oh, and Matt, for your, did you say agroforestry? Like
Oh,
Oh, I'm sorry. I wasn't looking at the screen. Agroforestry. Agro.
Okay, I didn't think that made sense, but okay. I was like, wow, I've never heard of that.
Thank you, Matt. And I feel as a facilitator, I've totally fallen into the trap of thinking that everybody knows everybody, because so many of us do, but Verna does not know everyone. So please introduce yourself rather than me introducing you if your hand's up and you want to offer your experience with qualitative methods. So the next person we have is Jennifer West. Go ahead, Jen.
Hello. So Verna, I'm the CTP coordinator at Narragansett-Bay, and I would say that I think the most experience I've had is with surveys, but with open-ended responses. And then a couple of other things which I'm not totally confident I know where they fall. So if I had to guess, I would say, like, we have advisory committees and meetings for certain projects we're working on. So I'm wondering if that would fall into the focus group category. And then the other thing is, I think I've collected a lot of information from facilitated Q&A and discussion segments of trainings. So I'm wondering, usually I'll facilitate, and if I have somebody to help me, I'll have them actually type notes. But I'm wondering if this is sort of an observational or ethnographic sort of technique. So I guess I have more questions than answers. So I guess I'll learn as we go along, because I'm a little confused as to what the real difference is, or maybe you can give more examples as we go on.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds great. And you know, also getting a better sense of what exactly happens during those facilitations or advisory committee meetings, you know, would be helpful. So maybe hopefully that'll come up later, and I'll be thinking about that as well. Thanks.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Jen, did you have a follow-up question? I just want to make sure because your hand's back up.
It is? I thought I put it down. Sorry. I thought I put it down. Is it down?
No worries. Oh.
Now?
Yep. You're all set now.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Matt, did you have a follow-up question? Because your hand's back up as well.
Yes, I did. I actually I really didn't get a chance to complete my thought that about what I really hope to gain out of this. I really would like to, as the previous speaker was saying, really focus in on how do you develop those questions that will be most effective at getting the research or the information you need to answer your research question.
Okay.
And that's it.
Okay. Good.
Okay.
Well,
and I'm not
we'll be
seeing any other hands.
Sorry, I was going to say we will be touching upon that question a little bit today, and because I know that several people are interested in that, I'll make sure that it is part of the other trainings. Okay.
Great.
No other hands?
Not right now.
Okay. All right. I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint then. Okay, so we're going to move into talking about case studies and thinking about what we want to study. And to do that, Chris is going to give a case study that we'll use similarly to my case study a bit throughout the training as an example.
All right.
So I'll turn it over to you, Chris.
Yeah, thanks, Verna, and thank you all that raised your hand and gave comments during that last session, because I think even for those that didn't raise their hand, we probably all heard familiar, the advisory committee. How could you be sure you're getting the most out of them? So I appreciate those. So to give you an example of a case study, and I'm not going to give you very many slides because those of you that have been CTP coordinators for 10 years are probably thinking, oh, not protecting our children's water again. But this was my first research experience with qualitative data. It was the study that I did for my dissertation, but it was also part of the needs assessment for the coastal training program at Wells. So the approach I used in my research was a case study research approach with qualitative methods. So we'll draw some examples from that. And what I was looking at in my research was using the concept of cultural models and the process of collaborative learning to organize the thinking behind my CTP program around ecosystem management and to kind of ground my CTP program in ecosystem management. So if you show the next slide, Verna.
Okay. You mean your grid?
Yeah, is the grid next or is that later?
No, here it is.
Okay, the little grid. Am I out of order, Verna?
That's okay. Yeah, you can use it if you need to use it now. That's fine.
Yeah, it just helps me organize. So we're going to be talking about research questions today, And so in the study I was doing, or my case study, again, it was about my coastal training program, but it was using the design of the coastal training program as a research project. So you'll hear very familiar things to things that you might do with your program, where we did a preliminary needs assessment, and folks said, well, water is a #1 priority in southern Maine. This was just heading the needs assessment. The #1 result that came back is you got to focus on water and you got to focus on municipal officials. So those two findings came back from the survey of the needs assessment. And then the case study research that I did related to how, if I better understood cultural models of water and its management and pollution, and how municipal officials understood and thought about water. And this research question, which Verna will talk more about research questions, but this question in that column under stakeholder analysis, that's an example of an ethnographic question, trying to get deep understanding of how people think, what their knowledge is, and their perceptions of a situation. So I didn't want to get too far into the research question idea,
Okay.
but this case study about water is one that I'll draw from that again, because many of you have heard about this before.
Great. Thanks, Chris. Okay, so I'm going to switch over again to our worksheet and move on to another question. Oh, where'd it go? Another question we have for you is you can take about 2 minutes each and let us know if you have a particular phenomenon that you're interested in studying, and what do you want to know about it. So what is the phenomenon and what do you want to know about it? And if you don't have anything yet, then just, I guess, don't raise your hand. And you can always share that with us when you do.
Yeah, and we could do this like a round robin, where I could just call on people in the list in order, and we could unmute you, and then if you want to pass, or if you want to talk about your case study, we could do it that way. Is that okay, Verna?
Yeah, right. That's what we discussed. I'm sorry. Yeah, let's do that.
So let's start. Annie, did you have a case study or a situation you're thinking of for focusing on in this course?
Sorry, I just got back from the bathroom. Was there anything else besides that? Just do you want to know what my example is?
Yeah, it's basically, when you're thinking about this course, is there something that you're going to focus on that you'll think about as in this course for qualitative data?
Yes, I have 2 things. One, I was thinking of the work I'm doing here at the reserve with our green team / sustainability team. And I was thinking sort of along the lines of how can the Wells Reserve be a model for sustainability. And then I had another one about more geared toward training of how do training participants apply the knowledge gained.
To apply knowledge, they need?
Apply knowledge gained at workshops.
Okay. Okay, so actually understanding how that happens currently and then making sure you can improve on that?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so you want to know, in the first case, how wells can be a model for sustainability, and how can training participants, apply knowledge gained at workshops. Good, that's very succinct. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Blake.
Chris, I'm just going to jump in. Roz sent me a message. She has to jump off soon, so if it's okay, let's have her go next.
Oh, great! Great idea. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Roz,
we can hear you, Roz.
Can you hear me? Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm not real sure how to phrase this, but we have certain sectors of our local government officials that just never show up, and it kind of goes back to that positioning idea, meaning that they know who I am how do I find out what those barriers are, why they're not participating, what will motivate them, without putting my position out in front of it. How do I get responses? Those are two different things, I guess.
Well, not necessarily. Yeah, no, that's great.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay.
All right,
Thanks,
Roz, that's a great one.
Yeah.
Kathy,
Well, it's a constant one. Thank you.
Okay. Are we ready to move on to Blake then?
yeah, oh, sorry, yeah, we'll go back to Blake.
Okay. Sorry about that, Blake. Go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. The case study that I chose when I was doing the video was pretty similar actually to the example case study. I'm working on a project right now, and our project team often has meetings that I would say are less than effective. And I have some suspicions about why and what might help make that process better. But I'd like to find a way to look at that in a way that helps me understand that a little bit better. But I also have a lot of other things just kind of knocking around in my head that I haven't been able to really form into a question yet. Things kind of like what Jen was mentioning earlier. We have a lot of facilitated discussions in our training and workshops, and I feel like there's a whole slew of data that I could mine out there from things like that, and I want to be able to get better at being able to put that data together. I just haven't figured out how to put that into a case study scenario yet.
Okay. 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 So how to actually capture what's happening in those facilitated trainings and workshops as data, and then use it to improve the trainings and workshops?
Right.
Yeah.
Or to develop next steps, whether it's a training or a workshop, or whatever the next step might be.
Okay. Okay. Great. Thank you.
Sure.
All right, and next is Kathy.
Okay, let's see. Well, for this project, I'm interested in fast forwarding to the future, and so this is based on actually a grant proposal that I've just submitted to the Science Collaborative, and so my interest is mobile technology and learning, particularly for future coastal managers, and so I'm just making a huge assumption here. I'm just for the, because I think it would be very helpful for me in the future if we do get funding for this grant, which is to develop a smartphone app or mobile app for the Padilla Bay Reserve and target it toward college students. So I guess my question would be, how does the Padilla Bay mobile app affect learning for college students who visit the reserve?
Okay. Can you spell what bay?
Padilla Bay or Padilla Bay, Padilla.
Okay. So I'm sorry, say it again. How does the Padilla Bay
mobile app affect learning for college students who visit the reserve?
Okay. Let's see, does that make more, does that look right? Okay.
And just as just as a clarification, it's for future coastal managers. So these would be students enrolled in environmental programs.
Okay. Interesting. So the idea is to actually use the mobile app in the classroom? I mean, as part of the curriculum?
Sorry, for some reason my sound is cutting out.
Okay. Well, it's very interesting. Maybe we can talk about it more if your sound is cutting out.
Okay, you're back.
Oh, okay, okay. So the idea is that when students visit the reserve, they'll use this mobile app.
Yes, which would have many features and different interactive ways to learn about the reserve, possibly like augmented reality where they could see where sea level rise could go in the future, and so yes, so that's the intention.
Yeah, okay, great, interesting. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, thanks, Kathy.
Sure.
Dwight, did you have a case study you're going to work on for the class?
Did you call me? This is Dwight.
Yes, Dwight. Do you have a case study you've got in mind?
Yeah, and I don't even know that it's a good fit for what you guys are doing here, which is why I'm sort of auditing this. But this year we're embarking on an evaluation of the Science Collaborative. And as part of that, we are doing a survey of the reserve program, staff out in the field to get their input and feedback on how, what their thoughts are about the Science Collaborative model that's been used and how it works. And so I come from a very quantitative analysis background from the natural sciences, and so I'm just trying to get a better sense for how best to use these less quantitative techniques for soliciting input and feedback and trying to synthesize that information to sort of get a general feel for how people view the Science Collaborative.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, so maybe more to add a bit of a mixed method approach to your evaluation.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think it's definitely doable. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Dwight. Heidi.
I guess I'm still kind of maybe I'll pass for now. I have a couple ideas in mind, but I'm not. I need more time to think about it.
Yeah, that's
okay.
Totally.
Yeah.
You'll be inspired by the other CTP coordinators.
I am. I'm getting very inspired. Thank you.
All right. Thanks.
Chris, I just want to say one thing. We want this experience to not be like stressful at all or anything. So, so just keep that in mind. There's no requirements really other than, participating to some extent.
Yes, that's a good reminder too, because it's like a virtual us sitting around in the lounge with a beer having a conversation.
Right. Exactly.
Yes. All right. Jen.
Hello again. So I'm interested in better understanding the barriers to successful implementation of low-impact development techniques by communities, and at the same time learning how they have been implemented successfully and what can we learn from that. Because I've been doing low-impact development stormwater-related workshops for a while, so I know there are barriers. There are many theories, I guess, of what they are. So I kind of want to see if those are true, and in essence, to help me design and deliver effective trainings in the future.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm sure you're not alone in that particular question. I mean, and that could be an example of a place where a few of us working on that same idea if we organized our work around questions that, you know, we all kind of used, we could say something nationally about our work just by going about an everyday coastal training program activity. So that's pretty cool. See, I'm already getting inspired myself. Thanks, Jen. Kristen.
Hello.
Hi there.
Hi. Sorry
Hi.
that I've been technologically challenged over here. We had a go-to meeting running in the background, and that I think was the problem. Can you remind me of the question, Chris? I think I remember it from up above.
Yeah, Verna, would you just remind Kristen what we're collecting?
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, so we're just collecting if you have a particular phenomenon in your work, for instance, that you'd like to you know, look into a little more, maybe using qualitative methods, and if so, what do you want to know about it?
Great, thank you. Yeah, one particular project we're working on right now is through our Neuroscience Collaborative project, and we're working with Sacramento State Center for Collaborative Policy to develop an issues assessment for wetland managers here in Southern California. And in just my initial conversations with the Center for Collaborative Policy, I'm recognizing that there is a very nuanced or specific way to ask questions to get at certain pieces of information. And I thought I had a good grip on that by doing our own needs assessments, but there seems to be a much more in-depth layer to that. So I'm curious to see how I can learn how to better formulate questions for needs assessments or issues assessments.
Okay.
And Kristen, I have a question. That term issue assessment, is it about understanding an issue from the different perspective of the people who are connected to that issue?
It is, yeah. So we're working with a group called the Wetlands Recovery Project, and so we're trying to get at barriers mostly to their work. So it was interesting, actually, in developing our proposal, we were calling it a needs assessment, but in working with the Center for Collaborative Policy, we came to understand that there seems to be a difference between how, you know, I was classifying a needs assessment versus an issues assessment. So they seem to be different, and I want to see if I can understand what the differences are, and maybe it's just in how the questions are asked or the audiences that are around a different, working on a different set of issues.
Cool, and that's another thing that'll be interesting about, you know, this small group of people sharing ideas is as we wrap our heads around new things we hear, like issues assessment, we might realize, oh yeah, I get the difference between a needs assessment and an issue assessment, and you might, as we learn more, you might say, oh, okay, I do that, I just didn't call it that.
Right.
Thanks.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, thank you.
Matt.
Yeah, hi everyone. My question is really related to exploring the effective and repeatable methodologies for constructing national training products through a large and diverse network of contributors. I wonder who those may be.
I hear guinea pig squeaking.
Yes.
Okay. Did I capture that?
Large and diverse network of contributors.
Large and diverse network of contributors. Okay. Okay, so
All right,
can you say
thanks.
a little bit? Oh.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, can you say a little bit more about what you mean of what are you thinking of exploring?
Well, basically, in the coastal training program nationally, we've only done one national product, and that was kind of developed at the local level by an individual coordinator on this call with the help of others. But creating or identifying ways to do that from the national level using the diverse local contributions of our network. So kind of like the opposite way of doing it than Kathy did. So instead of having it done at the start as a local development that is then broadened to a national scale that is then adaptable to local conditions.
Okay, so you're interested in studying the process of doing that?
Yes, the process specifically,
Okay.
considering the diverse network we have.
Okay, great. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Matt. Steve.
Sure.
Oops.
Hi. Well, mine's kind of generic. I want to improve my skills to using the qualitative methodologies to garner the most information I can from my training evaluations, public meetings, and audience interactions. And I'm thinking about CTP in general. I've got a lot of projects that some are related, some aren't. But and I want to use this, of course, to improve my program and to make sure that a key thing for me is kind of assessing and really getting a feel using these techniques to am I really meeting their needs, and then are there subsequent needs that need to be met to make the knowledge useful? Is there something, a follow-up that would, go the next step? Okay. So I'm kind of thinking broadly in terms of the coastal training program.
Okay.
I just really want to get better at making sure I'm utilizing the information I'm gathering and I'm not missing stuff. Sharpening my skills.
Right. Okay. Okay, right, because it sounds like, what some of you are saying is that you potentially have a lot of data at your fingertips and could be using it in a really productive way.
Yeah, I think so. There's a lot of different sources, and some are related and some aren't, but there can be a fair amount of information with any one training, and then with any one kind of like theme of trainings. And the hard part, of course, is being able to efficiently and effectively mine that information in limited time. But I just feel like I need to do a better job with that.
Yeah.
Those skills.
Okay. Good. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Steve. Tona Marie.
Hi, everybody. I have a couple ideas also in my head. I'm not sure I've decided on just one, but I'll offer two of them here. The first one is kind of similar to Jen's with the LID, the low impact development practices and the barriers affecting how communities put those into practice. In our context, mine is not so much LID, but it's really looking at the complexity around decision making as it relates to managing wastewater sources of nitrogen. That has been deemed our kind of #1 environmental issue here on the Cape, where our reserve is based, and has been ever since I got here and before that. And so that's the background. My questions are, we call it kind of all related. I'm struck by the fact that everybody agrees that the problem is urgent. The water quality problems we're experiencing is urgent, and that we need to do something about it. It's affecting the region. So I'm struck by why is progress so slow in terms of moving towards solutions when there's momentum and a lot of shared understanding of the problem. And so what I want to find out is, what are people's views of different wastewater treatment technologies and approaches, and how do they perceive that these technologies could affect their lives and their communities? So that's one part of it. because that's
I'm
where
sorry,
the
can you repeat that?
Sorry.
Would you repeat that? I'm sorry.
What are people's views of different wastewater treatment technologies and approaches, and how do they perceive the ways in which these technologies could affect their lives and their communities?
Okay.
So that's one part of it. And then the second part is, what are the factors that kind of slow progress? In the community.
Okay.
And so I want to use this information beyond just trainings, because while we do a lot of that and do it effectively from what our audiences tell us, I think because the decision making is so complex beyond just the decision makers that we are providing training or target audience, it becomes a community decision in the town meeting context. And so how can we use knowledge gained from those two questions to kind of help the community with problem solving?
Okay.
And then the second case study I had swirling around is something I started before but didn't quite finish just because of time, and it wasn't one of my main priorities. But I'm also struck by how, I don't want to say ineffective, but that's the word that comes to mind. It might be an inappropriate word. The NERRS system is at kind of use an investment we've made in swamp data. And that's not to pick on any group or anything, just as a whole. So my case study in this sense would be to kind of look at our reserve and our swamp data here and how that data is being used or not by who, and finding out who is using the data, and if they're not using it, why not?
Okay.
And Verna, SWAMP is an acronym for System-Wide Monitoring Program, so you can just take the A out of that.
Oh, okay, okay. All right.
There's no way in the world to know that intuitively.
Sorry, Verna, my apologies.
Oh, no, it's okay. Okay, great, thank you.
That's, Tana Marie, that question about SWAMP is like, what's the meaning of life?
No, no.
That's why I think my other one too. I just need to get some smaller questions, but
okay.
Just did it at a reserve scale. Maybe we'll get our hands around it better.
Yeah, but I mean, if you know, we've all thought about it for a very long time. Some of us just gave up thinking about it and went on to other things.
Mm-hmm.
But thanks for keeping it on the table. Verna, is it okay to just kind of pause a minute and see if anybody wants to raise their hand with any questions of each other? Is that okay with you? Are we okay for time?
I just want to step in and say you are at your time for this section. So if Verna thinks she could be flexible with the next section, then sure.
Maybe if there's one question.
Yeah, does anybody have a burning question about, now that you've heard these things, anybody have a burning question that you can't save till later? Okay, Verna, looks like we're good.
Okay, all right. Well, thanks everyone for sharing
Verna,
those.
before you, sorry to interrupt, but before you go on, we have had a request. Are you showing PowerPoint in slideshow view? Or
I am. No, no, I'm not.
Can you just, for this section, do that? I think it makes it much bigger for people on the screen.
Oh, yeah. Okay, right. I can do that.
Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't think of that. Okay. Okay. Quickly, before we go on to the next section, I wanted to mention, well, thank you for sharing the case studies, and some of those are, or all of them are really interesting and relevant to this training. We will try to use one or two of your case studies as examples to sort of work through during these trainings. Unfortunately, we don't have enough time to use all, but we want to make sure that through other means that everyone gets good feedback on your ideas, whether that be, us responding to your portfolio, or you calling into office hours, or really contacting me, and I think I could speak for Chris, at any time that you feel like you want to run something by us.
Yes, definitely.
Okay, good. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about crafting research questions. And so before conducting a study, you would come up with one or more overarching research questions. And some of you have already done that in when you described your case studies. So, in those research questions, really try to get at what ultimately do you want to know? And maybe you're not sure exactly what you want to study, but you have a hunch, as some of you do. So if that's the case, you might start with a broad overarching research question, and through that iterative process that I mentioned earlier, you can begin to get more specific and hone in on a theme or pattern. So your research questions may change as you start to learn from the data. Chris, did you want to say anything more about your research questions?
No, I think in the interest of time, because I kind of touched on this a little, but I think we've got a group with lots of good questions, so we'll just keep going forward and use their examples.
Okay. Okay, great. All right, so I'm going to try to figure out how I can minimize my screen without ending the show. Oh, okay, I'll just have to end the show. Okay, so for this part, what we would like to do is to take one of your case studies, and maybe it could be a case study that already has a research question, or one that doesn't, and actually sort of craft the question. So if there is a question, we can talk about, would we change anything about the question? What does that question, what kind of information would that question give us? Or we can craft something from scratch. So would anyone be willing to volunteer to let us use their case study? Okay, let's see. Okay, Jennifer and Kathy. Okay, so maybe we'll be able to have time to do both. I don't know who raised their hand first, but
Kathy had her
maybe
hand up
one of you. Pardon me.
Kathy had her hand up first.
Kathy, okay. Okay. Okay.
I wasn't eager or anything. Okay.
Okay. Oh, no. Okay, so let's start with Kathy, and then we'll see how much time we have. Let's just review. Hang on. Okay, here's Kathy here. Number 4. So, oh, right. Okay. So you're interested in mobile technology and learning for future coastal managers, developing a smartphone app. And how does so this is your question so far. How does the Padilla Bay mobile app affect learning for college students who visit the reserve?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Okay, so let me put that back here. Okay, great. Do you want to, Kathy, say anything about, what you hope to get from having an answer to this research question?
Yes. So again, this is this is projecting into the future, and it's related to a grant proposal that we've just submitted to the Science Collaborative, and so our proposal is to actually develop a really cool mobile app that could be used on smartphones or tablets by college students who visit the reserve, and specifically the college students would be folks in environmental programs at local community colleges or universities who need to understand coastal issues and you know, possible impacts of sea level rise and that sort of thing. And so our intended users in this for this grant are students from the local community college program. It's the environmental conservation program, and so we've been in contact with the professor there and the department chair, and they've committed their class and 10 students out of their class to help us go through the collaborative process, as well as the professors. And then so ultimately we would want to actually have them run a class or two, use it out at the reserve using this app. And so for our idea for a future funding beyond the current one we've applied for would be to actually do a qualitative research study in determining the effectiveness and how did it affect learning? Did it improve it? Did it motivate students more because they have this fun tool in their hand? But we're trying to basically create something that would meet current learners where they are now, which is very mobile oriented.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so hang on, just taking notes here. Okay, so this is great. So the questions that I would ask when you're starting to create your research questions is so you could start very broad, which your question here is somewhat broad. Mm-hmm. And through that through that iterative process, start to get more specific about maybe you're interested in one particular aspect of learning. So some of what I heard when you were talking is that you could study how the app affects learning of coastal issues such as impacts on sea level rise. Okay, so you could be very specific and look at that particular thing. Mm-hmm. Or you could find out what types of coastal issues does the app work best for learning, I guess. Mm-hmm. Or you can also test the actual method of learning and ask about the actual application itself. And as you said, meeting learners where they are now, and so really exploring that idea. Well, where are they now? With this technology, and is this the answer to where they are now? And then another angle. You mentioned motivation, and so that can be another angle that you may want to explore. Does this app make them want to explore these issues because it's fun or whatever? And so really, I guess my point is, you could, in this kind of research, you could start broad and then start to come to these specific questions, or you can, start with a specific question and thinking about, well, what ultimately would help you to achieve your goals with the app. And maybe it's to explore more than one of these things, and so therefore you'd need to take two sort of separate tracks. So does that make sense or resonate at all with what you're thinking? Did I capture?
Yeah, absolutely. No, this is very helpful. I'm taking quick notes here.
Okay. Okay. So the when I was in school, I think it took me like a year to come up with my overarching research questions because that sounds really discouraging. So just pretend I didn't say that. But it's just getting at the heart, at the essence of what you want to know. It's great to to talk it out. And so just for the fun of it, I guess, is there one of those tracks that you think you might be more interested in?
Let's see. I like well, one would be how does it affect the learning of coastal issues and be more specific that way.
Mm-hmm. Okay, can we take that and just play around with it for a little?
Sure.
Okay. All right. So this is where I'd like to hear from Kathy and as well as everyone else who wants to chime in. So if in fact the goal was to see whether this app helps students or broadens students' perspective of particular coastal issues, does anyone want to take a stab of how you might word that? So, keeping in mind a couple things about qualitative research questions. So one is that they tend to be exploratory, in nature. So there's no obvious answer. And as mentioned in the video, sometimes they start with certain words that can help, can help you craft those questions, such as in what ways, under what conditions, what is the relationship between, as Kathy has here, how, So would anyone want to take a stab at crafting a question, how this app affects learning of coastal issues? Did I just create the question? I hope not. Would love to hear from someone. No takers? Oh, okay.
Verna, it's Chris. Question I thought of is when I try to think of a question for the app, then I immediately go, well, how can we just isolate the effect of the app teaching them something from something they already knew? So then I got stymied on what the question would be, because what if they already knew it and it wasn't a result of the app?
Right.
And
right. Right. So it might be that in selecting your participants, you would want to select students who maybe did not know about a particular coastal issue. So maybe doing a little pre-testing or something.
Another thing. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just thinking that we would be curious to know basically how they interacted with it too, and that's a little bit. I realize that's a little bit different angle of what worked really well or not about it. What in the way it's designed. Did the there could be different methods within the app that we use. There could be a scavenger hunt. There could be augmented reality. There could be access to aerial photos of the coastline in that area. It could be anyway, those are some of the things. So it would be interesting to know, almost to evaluate their experience with the different parts as well.
Right. Okay. So, right, and there's some interesting research that's out of Tufts where they're using the virtual reality program Second Life. They're using that software. I don't know if you are all familiar with that. It's basically kind of like this online world where you can choose an avatar and sort of vicariously experience this other world through your avatar. And so what they're doing is they're taking the software and they're creating a real town. And so, Wells, Maine, for instance, and they're working with decision makers to, and others, I mean, to use the interface to make decisions and to move within it. And then they're documenting and they're capturing how people use that interface, and also whether or not they participate more in decision making because there's anonymity associated with it. So I think your idea of capturing how people are using the app in those different parts of it could be really interesting. and there's other potential examples to draw upon for that.
Okay.
So Verna, we've had Tona Marie who's had her hand up for some time. Okay, let me go ahead and unmute her.
Now, we probably passed this point already, but it was just when Verna asked about people giving suggestions for the types of questions you could ask. Mine was pretty basic, just in what specific ways could the app affect learning by college students? So trying to tease out, and I think Chris mentioned this later, like what are they learning because of the app? You know, what specific ways could it enhance their learning?
Right. Yeah. Is that, I'm doing effect wrong, I guess. No, that doesn't. Anyway, yeah, right. So the cool thing about that is that you could begin sort of with the premise that learning can mean anything, because it might be that that what they are learning is not about coastal issues or something, or that sort of peripheral to to something else, whatever that might be. Maybe that they're learning that they actually like thinking about these ideas through this medium, or you could define learning and be specific, and so I think you could go either way. It's interesting. Thank you. Would anyone else like to take a shot at a question or respond to anything that's been said?
Are you open to a new question or just continue with the same one, Verna?
No. Yeah, no, we can, new question.
Jen, did you want to go with your question?
What? Okay. Two things, just before Jen goes ahead. Roz has had her hand up for a little while, so I wanted to give her an opportunity to talk, and then we are about 5 minutes out for this section.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Dolores, because I don't have a view where I'm seeing all the hands at once.
Yeah, no problem. So let me unmute Roz.
Okay. Yeah, I just had a quick question on this discussion here. Would it be valid, would you really get a good measure if you were to ask the students if it was something they learned as a result of using the app, or could they really parse out what they already knew to what they learned?
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. And I think so one way to sort of try to account for that would be to and we'll get into sampling in just a minute, but to choose your population specifically so that you don't run into that issue. So it might be that you want to make sure that you're working with students who have had no other experience with coastal issues, for example. Another angle, though, could be and I've done something like this before, to understand what they've learned in the past and how they're using that knowledge and integrating it with what they're learning currently through the app. And so because conceivably that's a lot what's happening, with the learning, they're integrating it into what they already know. And so, it could be interesting to see, well, what does that integration look like? And are there patterns, that when people use the app to learn about coastal issues, they're associating it with something, with a particular thing that they've learned in the past. I don't know, Chris, do you have any?
Well, I was just thinking that last thing that you said is fundamentally what we're always thinking about is as we introduce any kind of new info, whether it's with an app or a training or a skill building, we want to know when we've done our training or done our workshop, did people take the information up and do they know more than they did before? So I think that kind of research question, touches on everything that people have given as examples.
Right. And one of the methods that we're not going over in the training, but that Chris and I both know a bit about is the idea of mental modeling. And I think this would actually work really well to get at, you know, sort of associations that students are making, you know, with what they already learn and what they're learning now. And so, you know, we don't have time to go into it, but I think, you know, I guess the underlying point there would be that the way in which you collect data, you know, or the data collection methods you choose will have to, you know, actually get you what you want to know. And so, so I think mental modeling, if you're interested in that, could you know, be a good choice.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have 2 minutes. Jen, is it Jen that has do you want to just share your question? We can talk about it for a minute.
We don't have to if we're running short on time.
Okay, well maybe if you don't mind, maybe we'll move on.
Yeah, that's fine, thanks.
Okay, all right, but if you want to send us anything, we're happy to.
Okay.
I'm happy to. Yeah.
Hey, can I make a suggestion?
Yeah.
Jen, maybe you could post your question on Basecamp. And
sure.
if people have ideas about it, they could weigh in that way.
Sounds good.
That's great, Dolores, and we were going to offer up that method of interacting after the call, kind of asking folks to just go onto Basecamp for 5 minutes and get the questions that they're formulating and share them with everybody. So not only for Jen, but everyone.
Yeah. Yes. And we'll be checking Basecamp. So if you can't do it after the call, you know, we'll be checking it, so we can always respond at another time.
Okay. And I also just want to note, Kathy, your hand's still up. I want to make sure that there isn't any lingering comment or question that you had.
Oh, I don't. It looks like I thought I had actually lowered my hand, but let me click it again. Okay.
I think maybe you're double clicking it. It's back up. It goes up and goes
with the
down.
little arrows. Oh, okay. Oh, I
there
see.
You go.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. That was helpful.
Okay, great. Thank you for letting us go through your ideas. Okay. So let's switch gears a little bit to data collection. And so thinking about your case, you have your overarching research question or questions, and now you need to decide who's best to study initially. And there are a few common sampling techniques in qualitative research. And one is this idea of purposive sampling. And this is where participants are pre-selected by certain criteria. So, for instance, for my staff meeting case study, it might make sense for me to purposely sample those involved in the meetings. Okay, so let's say there are 15 participants in the staff meetings and all 15 participate in the study. But then after conducting, let's say, in-depth interviews with 11, I no longer hear any new data. This is called theoretical saturation. And basically, this means that the additional data no longer brings new insights to the research question. So again, using that sort of flexible nature of qualitative research, you can stop with 11 participants, but you only will know this if if you're doing that iterative process and collecting and analyzing data simultaneously. Another method.
Verna, can I give an example from that? Just
Please
in
do.
thinking, a couple of you who mentioned that you wanted to understand barriers to something, like I think Tana Marie said, barriers to adopting wastewater technologies. So an example of what Verna just said is if Tana Marie arranges a series of interviews and she thinks she needs 20, but after she's done 10, she keeps hearing the same things that came out in the first 5. So she got new ideas for the first 5 interviews and ends up with, say, a list of 6 barriers to adopting wastewater technologies. Then she does the next 5 interviews. She doesn't get anything more. So just for the purpose of efficiency, she might say, well, these are the major barriers that if I want to move forward, I'm going to start with these. I'll always be listening for additional barriers. But in my sampling, I got to saturation after the first 5, because I did 5 more and I heard no new barriers. Does that make sense, Verna, when I say it that way?
Yeah, absolutely. And also, I mean, another option that might happen or scenario would be that you are hearing or what you're hearing is making you think that you need to ask different questions, or you need to or explore something else, or even study other people, and so you could shift gears as well.
Yeah, like you might have been talking to public works directors and you think, oh, that's all the ideas, and then you start talking to realtors and oh, you get a whole new set.
Right. Thanks. Yeah, and Chris, just chime in at any time, please. Okay. Okay, so in quota sampling, you decide while you're designing the study how many people you want to include with particular characteristics. So these characteristics might include age, place of residence, gender, class, profession, marital status. So for example, maybe my research question related to the staff meetings asks just about female participation in class meetings. In staff meetings. Or maybe I'm interested in exploring interactions among senior and junior staff and not interested in middle management, for example. And then lastly, in snowball sampling, and someone, I can't remember who, but someone earlier, I think, mentioned an example of using snowball sampling. In this technique, you might connect with one or a few key informants, essentially, and use their social networks to be referred to others. So this is really helpful when you know what you want to study, but you need some assistance to be connected to the relevant population. And so let's say, I'm interested in environmental decision-making of the reserve system, but I don't know anyone in the reserve system, or I'm not sure who to connect with. I might contact some of you and to ask, where should I start interviewing? And lastly, I just want to say a word about recruiting participants. And then this is probably really obvious, and I'm sure those of you who have done research in other countries, particularly like Matt, you were saying in Africa, you need to be sensitive to certain social and cultural norms, and and this can be something as simple as well, what's the best way to contact them? Are there or knowing what particular values are important to those you're studying, and how you word your recruitment solicitation, to be respectful to these different values, and is important to think about. Okay. So when you're collecting data, and we've talked a lot about this, but just as a review, data can be in the form of, oral data, so interviews, focus groups, etc. Textual data, so like meeting minutes, photographs, even maps, or observation and participation. So given that, I'd like to explore the idea of data collection a little bit, and I'm going to shift gears here.
Sorry to interrupt, but before you go on, Matt has his hand raised, so I just want to make sure if he has a question relevant to what you were just talking about, we capture it.
Okay.
I didn't have a question. I just had a comment around cultural norms. In my case, were very important. You could easily make a misstep and ruin your sample by not, for instance, greeting people when you first meet them in a certain way. So I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, yes, absolutely.
Thank you, Matt.
And I'm sorry that I didn't put it on slideshow view. I just remember that. So stop me, just scream out if I don't do it again. Any other thoughts or questions before we go
on? Let's see. Tona Marie has a question.
Hi, maybe this is something you might address later, but it's trying to figure out like how managing your time, your resources, and getting a good sample population. So just answering that, like the questions I have relate to, decision maker groups as well as the wider community. So getting at community members, and that can just be, obviously, it's like everybody, So when does it stop? Like where do you have to, how do you figure out the right mix of perspectives in there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really good question. Well, some of it is going to, obviously depend on your research question. And I think the purposive sampling could be useful in that, that you're purposely trying to find sort of a equal representation, of the people that you're of the groups that you're interested in, in studying. And so, as you said, when you talk about like the public or something, like what does that mean? And, so it might be that you, you use purposive sampling to say, okay, well, I want to make sure that I include someone who, is part of a certain affiliation, for instance, or, who are, and similarly, you could use quota sampling to say, I want people of a certain age range, for instance. So I think, getting sort of more specific, but also again, the flexibility of qualitative research. If you you'll realize whether or not you have the right sample, whether the sample is enough to give you what you need. And as we talked about earlier, that idea of theoretical saturation, where you start hearing the same types of things from a variety of people. For example, if you need to have a broad representation.
Thank you. That was helpful.
Okay, good. Okay, so.
And Verna, we have one more comment or question from Matt, okay. I think.
No.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Put your hand down, Matt.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to go back to our little worksheet here. Okay. So, well, how about, and I'm going against what Chris and I talked about. Sorry, Chris, but and I hope this is okay. Jen, could we use your case study to talk about what might be good methods to collect data? Is Jen there?
Sorry, Jen, go ahead. Yep, that was me.
Yep.
A little slow.
No, it's okay. Oh, absolutely. Yep.
Okay, so can you just quickly remind us, what your case study is and what your question is?
Essentially just finding more out about barriers to the implementation of low impact development in Rhode Island communities.
Okay, great.
And, yep.
Okay. And
implementation.
Pardon me? Yeah, barriers of implementation of LID in Rhode Island. Yep, that's okay. And essentially, this is so that I can better design and deliver future trainings to address these things. That's really my main impetus for this.
Okay. Okay, great. And so just to get a little bit more specific, when you say barriers of implementation, barriers to whom? The people that live, I mean, can you talk a little bit more about that?
Essentially, if this stuff is not being implemented, because we do a lot of training, if it's not being implemented in the town after we give the training, why is this? So is it because of the political will? Is it funds? Is it they need more technical assistance, etc.? Those would all be barriers. And yeah.
Okay, and so this is of actual community decision makers, right?
Right.
Like
Yep.
municipal officials. Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So would anyone, including you, Jen, want to take a stab at a data collection method that you might use, and talk a little bit about why?
Well, I'm certainly open to suggestions.
Okay.
I kind of feel like I use the post-training evaluations to gather as much as I can. I use the discussion time during trainings as much as I can. But, you know, if things still aren't moving forward, I guess I kind of need to know more. I feel like I need to know more, I guess. So what do I do next?
Right.
So maybe it's focused interviews, or interviews or focus groups or something like that. But I kind of feel like maybe people have done some of that, and maybe I need to see what's already out there. But I feel like people have done this, but sometimes things still aren't moving forward. So like, what do I do? You know, I feel like, okay, what do I do next then? So I guess I'm a little bit stuck.
And so you feel like that there's been something, some research or something to understand these particular communities?
Yeah, I need to look again. Maybe not. We kind of sent out like a better site design sort of survey asking what they've done, what they've adopted and what they haven't adopted, and just to get a general idea. But I don't think it went in depth enough about what they really need or what's within our capacity to give them to move forward with it. So it was sort of a general, we kind of gave them options. Is it lack of political will? Is it funding? Is it not enough staff? Blah, blah, blah. And kind of posed sort of open-end questions or had them try to give comments as much as possible. But we didn't get a whole lot of that. So really what we needed to do initially was almost just do like an inventory. Who's doing what? And we got a general sense of maybe why it wasn't happening, but not enough, I don't think, to help me in the future. So now I'm trying to figure out what this next step is, and my big fear is always of over training or overwhelming, I guess, our audiences with surveys and this and that, with their just have them being so busy. So trying to figure out a really streamlined way to do it so I'll get the most out of it. So I don't know if that makes any sense at all. That's kind of where I am.
Oh yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Yeah. No, I imagine that's a a problem for others as well.
Verna, Steve Miller from New Hampshire has a question or a comment.
Great.
Yeah, my comment is that my sense, what I would do or instinctively want to do would be interviews to really try to hone down Jen's question and what the barriers are, but understanding what you're saying about not wanting to overwhelm people or over-survey them, or and the thing I would do next would really be try to observe, but it certainly isn't quick and easy to do observational stuff. But if there was a way to observe meetings where these proposals were being evaluated, if you had an LID proposal, and just to try to hear what the boards are saying and what their comments are, and then use their qualitative techniques maybe to mine that for information. Maybe like the words that come up or how they code, coding it. But I don't think that's going to be quick and easy.
No,
but
but
it might be a good intern project or something.
Right, exactly. No, that's great. Thanks, Steve.
Yeah, I like that idea of observing the meetings. Right, because it's really kind of trying to understand, how making decisions about, this particular thing happens sort of in relation to everything else, So, you might learn that it's not really just decision making about low impact development, but it's really the way in which, a community makes decisions in general. Anyone else want to share some thoughts?
Yeah, I just had two things came up when I was listening to Jen that I think we all recognize, is that wondering if somebody's already figured out this thing that you're wrestling with and how to take advantage of work that other people have done. And then that second aspect of kind of, is this a job for training, or is it another kind of job? And when you think about it, well, there's certain things you address through training, other things you might address through, say, an action committee. But I think those are two big questions that, as we design research, or even thinking of, is this a job for qualitative research? So when I listened to Jen, those two things kind of stuck out for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that makes sense. Any other thoughts or data collection techniques that you would love to learn more about?
Not seeing any hands, Verna, and you're about 5 minutes out for this section.
Ah, okay. All right, so let's move on. Thank you, Jen.
Thanks.
And everyone. Okay. Nope, wrong way. Oh my goodness. Where am I going? Okay. All right, so I want to talk a little bit about designing data collection questions. So data collection questions are not to be confused with research questions, which we talked about earlier. So research questions are about what you want to know, and data collection questions are those you need to ask to find out what you want to know. They're used in a lot of the methods that we've talked about, interviews, focus groups. And here are some types of questions to, or I'm going to talk about some types of questions to help you think about how to elicit information from a research participant. And a lot of what I'm going to talk about is from some work that's been done on cognitive interviewing. There was, okay, I forgot. All right, so first there are descriptive questions, and these are questions that are good to begin with. Things like, what is your role within the organization? Sort of good for breaking the ice. In terms of demographic questions, if you are asking demographic questions, in my experience, waiting to the end is actually better, particularly if you don't know the person, and I think I've offended at least one person I know of who, by asking her age, early on, and so sort of building a rapport, and then asking those questions at the end. There are also storytelling questions which encourage more in-depth conversation from the participant. So things like, can you tell me more about your role at staff meetings or something? There are opinion questions, and these help to get at the participants' impressions and feelings and assertions. So things like, so what do you consider to be the ideal staff meeting, for example? There are structural questions that sort of tap into people's ideologies, and so things like, so how did you come to this way of thinking? And that is probably my #1 favorite question in interviews, and you know, and even in focus groups. People generally love to answer that question, and will often bring up childhood and you know, all sorts of things, and you can get some really good stuff. And it helps, I think, build just trust in a way. And then there are hypothetical questions which ask the participant what they might or might not do, or I guess might do, or what things would be like in a particular situation. So, you know, these could be used in situations where there might be some conflict that you know of in the phenomenon you're studying. So, you know, you might ask someone what it would be like to be in someone else's position, you know, for example. It's also good for hypothetical questions to ask the opposite of what they're saying is important to them. So, for example, you know, if an air system is important to you, and I might ask, you know, what would it be like if there was not a NERRS system? And asking the opposite of what is important can actually be helpful toward having them actively reflect on their viewpoints in real time. And it also helps you to see how closely tied they are to their viewpoints and the extent to which they can reflect upon other viewpoints. So that's probably my second favorite, is asking the opposite of what is important. Then there's the devil's advocate question, and you know, this challenges the respondent to consider an opposing view. So, you know, some might say it's a little bit more of a challenging question, like, you know, some say there's no hope to staff meetings. How would you respond? And lastly, there are interpretive questions, and so these questions basically involve you interpreting what the respondent has been saying, and then asking for a reaction to that. So let's say the participant feels that staff meetings are disorganized and certain people hog the conversation. So from that, you might interpret the following question. You might interpret, in what ways might an outside facilitator be helpful? You know, and this is where you can be flexible in your questioning, but also trying to be careful not to be leading in a certain direction. And also with these interpretive questions, you might go off your interview guide of questions as you interpret participants' responses, and that's okay in qualitative research. There are some types of questions to avoid. So multiple questions, things like, so how do you feel about the facilitator and the meetings? Okay, that can just get a little bit sometimes too complicated. Or leading questions, as I mentioned, so things like, so what problems have you had with the manager? And then yes or no questions that don't really lead anywhere, like, do you like staff meetings? Unless they're followed up with, you know, well, tell me more about that. So I guess before this is the last slide. I want to see if Chris has anything else to add. I'll go back to crafting data collection questions.
I'm good.
Okay. Okay. And how are we doing on time?
We have just about 10 minutes.
Okay. All right. So maybe we can open up the floor to questions and comments. Maybe I'll just quickly go over this last slide before we do that. So some of the next steps before our February 6th training will be to watch another video, and we'll be getting more into coding and analyzing qualitative data, and expect that soon. Also, I'll put up some reading material that might be of interest. If there are, I'm going to make sure that the reading material reflects some of your interests that I've heard today, but if there are things that you want to make sure, you know, you get resources on something in particular, please let me know. We will have office hours again, and those are in your course packet. and and through those or through like Basecamp, if you want to share your research questions, data collection techniques, learning portfolio, please do. Chris or Dolores, is there anything that you'd like to add to next steps?
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I would just say if anybody wants to talk through their question, because if things have come up and you thought, oh, well, I really want to, you can see just from this brief time together when we worked on Kathy's example or Jen's example, sometimes you just need to talk it out with one person for like 10 minutes. So you don't have to wait till office hours. Now that the Science Collaborative grant is in, I feel like I have all kinds of free time. We will be interviewing for the new research coordinator, but I can work around that and give people a call if you want to talk.
Yes, and feel free to call me as well. Okay, well then maybe we'll just open it up for questions until our time's up.
Sounds great. We have Roz Kilcollins, and I'll unmute her.
Of course, I always have questions. I'm real interested in the storytelling aspect. I think people are more open when they get to talk about themselves and their experiences. I don't know if we'll go into that in any more detail, but I think it's a really good tool. I don't know how to do it.
Yeah, if others are interested in crafting like data collection questions, we could find a way to incorporate that. I mean, because it's something that we could do like we're doing now, where we're taking examples and thinking about, well, what would be an example of a storytelling question for this particular case study? What would be an example of a a hypothetical question? And so maybe since I have some ideas of what people are interested in, maybe some way we can put that out to everyone and people can say, yes, I would like to do that, or
yeah,
because I think that would be really useful. And if no one else is interested, then maybe that I could work with you on doing that.
Okay, thanks.
And Roz, that's a great idea because stories are so powerful. And I've seen in climate workshops that Steve Miller has done, where one way he gets over barriers to people thinking about climate change is asking people to tell stories about things they've seen in their lifetime about like wacky weather. And so it gets that narrative that people have in their head, and using those stories of real experiences, and other people in the room will go, yeah, I saw that too, kind of thing. So for climate, stories can be powerful and not as threatening as, just the data.
Yes.
Very good.
And then we have a question from Tona Marie. Thanks, Roz.
Oh, I have a couple of questions, but I'll just ask one now so I won't hog the time. But first, I just wanted to say how great this was. I found it really, really good. And how did you come to this way of thinking question, Verna, which I too like from just the way it sounds. Do you find that people find that, you said people usually like answering that because they can talk about how they feel and their childhood and blah, blah, blah. But do you find that the opposite is also true, that people get overwhelmed because it's like all these different things they have to think about that has somehow made its way into them having a certain decision? They might not be able to pinpoint one thing.
Yeah, right. So I have experienced both. But in the case that you're talking about, I haven't experienced people not feeling comfortable being able to think through that. So for instance, I remember for one study I was asking people about eating meat, and so asking someone, well, why don't you eat meat? And well, I'm concerned about killing animals or something, and so that's pretty succinct and short. But then you have someone else who has, well, where do I start? And so that has those kinds of responses have a lot to do with you know, people's personality style, all sorts of things. So, you know, I think you're right. And it might be that if people come across as feeling overwhelmed by that question because they don't know where to start, you know, you could help them break it down. And so thinking in advance, you know, how you might break that down for someone, given, you know, what you're talking about, could be helpful.
Great. And I just had one other comment for suggestion for Jen, but I'm not sure. You guys can respond to it, you and Chris, so whether you think this would be a worthwhile endeavor. When you asked like how else, Jen was trying to figure out what other ways to collect information. What about like meeting minutes? I mean, it's pretty labor intensive to observe all these different meetings that the town officials are having around LID. Maybe you can go to a few, you know, few that you know about, and they're really talking about LID. But do you think it would be worthwhile to look at some of the boards that are really thinking about LID or falls under their jurisdiction and seeing when they've had that discussion? And because those meeting minutes are usually pretty comprehensive.
Absolutely. No, I think that, you know, coupled with this idea of you know, of observing, you know, and maybe doing more informal asking of questions, like after the meeting or something, I think those two together could be really useful. And also the other thing that's cool about meeting minutes is, especially if you're interested in sort of dynamics of a group, is looking at who talks after who and how and whether or not people directly respond to one another, and sort of mapping out the conversation and the flow of information and communication can be really interesting and can, I think, can sometimes give you something, you know, give you information about dynamics that could be useful.
Great, thanks
you. Thanks for that suggestion. Chris, do you want to say anything or any other questions?
Nope, I kind of want to be respectful of people's time since it is 3.
Oh, it is, okay. Okay.
Just on the money here.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you for spending 2 hours talking about this.
All the effort you've put into getting us ready for today and shepherding us through these issues today. So kind of like there ought to be a button for applause.
Well, people could put up their hands right now.
Oh, no.
There you go.
Okay.
I would echo that. Thank you so much, Verna, for stepping up to do this. And I just want to take 15 seconds more of people's time to say, you know, this project came out of an idea for transfer, for sharing information from one science collaborative project with reserves around the system. You know, the work that Verna is doing with Chris for the Sustaining Coastal Landscapes project at Wells uses these techniques, and that's how they came up with this idea, and they knew there'd be interest. So, you know, we do have a transfer request for ideas, because I'm sure you're not tired of writing proposals. But it's coming out tomorrow, and it's a lot lower level of investment to test your idea with us than the RFP, obviously. Stakes are much smaller. It's coming out tomorrow, and I encourage you all to take a look at it, because as I look at the list, just about everybody is part of a Science Collaborative funded project, and even if you're not, it could be that someone is doing something really cool, like Chris and Verna are doing at Wells, and you want to hear more about it, or you want to organize an experience like this around it, or have us help you do that. So I just wanted to put that shout out. You'll be seeing it in your email box tomorrow, but yeah, so thank you.
It's a good thing.
Transfer is a good thing, yeah. Put that on a t-shirt.
All right, thank you guys very much.
Yes,
thank you, everybody.